My name is Rick Mansfield, by the way. I've been an Accordance user since 1998. I'm going to talk to you a little bit this morning about some basic searches in English. We'll be doing some more advanced work with original languages, I believe, this afternoon. And then I'm also going to talk about key number searches and how those are a benefit, because what key number searches do is it allows, even if someone who doesn't know the original languages, or maybe your original languages are rusty, it still allows you to access those even from an English language text. And so I'm going to take you through that, and I'll briefly show you an interlinear view as well toward the end. So if you look on here on page 12 of that seminar manual, you'll notice in that big blue box there, this is something that's very important to remember. In Accordance, everything is a search. And so that's just something to kind of keep in mind. Everything in Accordance is kind of centered around the text. And that's kind of philosophically how Accordance is like or unlike perhaps some of its competitors at times. Everything is centered around that text. And so you kind of start with that search tab. As Tim talked about, you set that default text at the beginning. And so in looking at this, Tim went over most of these items that you see there in that kind of that mid graphic there. But let me mention again one thing that he did, and I'm going to zoom in on it this time. You see this, because some of you in the back might not have been able to see that. You can see here this is verses or words, searching for verses or words. And so when you're doing a search, that's one thing to keep in mind. Now, used to in the old days, in earlier versions of Accordance, if you put in the wrong search, it would kind of yell at you. There's not a book by this title, and it's nice now because it kind of knows now, and it can make those kinds of guesses. And they use an example there at the bottom of page 12. They use the example of something like Mark. You know, if I'm over here in if I do a search for Mark, what would be the difficulty there if it's verses or words? What's that going to do? It can search the book of Mark, or what if I'm wanting to look actually for the word Mark? That can make a difference too. So some of those kinds of words, you really have to pay attention to the difference. Now there is a little keyboard shortcut that you can. This command semicolon will take you back and forth between words and verses. And let me see if I can zoom in and do that there. So I can, and it's Control semicolon on the Mac. I mean on Windows. But notice there that command semicolon will take you back and forth very easily. But it's smart enough that in most cases it's going to know what you're wanting to do. So obviously you put a word in there in that search window. You hit return, and in this case it did a search for the word Mark. And why did it do that? Because I had words selected, right? So by the same token, if I'm switched here to verses and I do that, it just takes me to the beginning of Mark, just like Tim showed you a minute ago. If you just put in the book of the Bible, it'll take you right there to the beginning of it. Now, I want to go back again, and I want to reemphasize something that Tim said that kind of took me a long time to really get the mindset of. I should say I knew it, but to really get the mindset of it. And I'll zoom in here. If you kind of go back through here to show your history, I clicked on that little magnifying glass there, and if I go back, that'll show every search that you've done. And if I go back to all text, I sometimes even will hear from new Accordance users when they do a search for just a passage. Maybe they want to see Mark chapter 1. Well, if you do the search, it just will have Mark chapter 1 in there. It's really best to go down here to this go-to window that's in the bottom right-hand corner, and put Mark 1 in there if you don't want to just exclusively look at that text. And that's something that I kind of had to remember, because that way I don't have to go in and reset that if I'm just wanting to look at a passage not in exclusion of the other. And another little trick here is when I hit the tab button, it'll go back and forth between that search window and the go to button. So that's a that's a nice little way to jump back and forth. Now, I'm gonna move here to page 13, and I'm kind of just roughly going through this. But if you have a question, stop me and ask. And we're talking here about searching for verses, and accordance is smart. It's great that it's smart. So I've got it right now. I've got it set to verses, and it gives some examples here. But I can type in GE3, and I can go to Genesis 3. Right now, I'm going to take it back to all text. I can type GN3, and it'll take me there too. It's smart enough to, because there's probably about half a dozen or a dozen standard abbreviation sets that will work. But what if I want to go to John 3 and I just type JO? I got an error. Why is that a problem? Joel, Jonah, John, that's not enough letters. So in that case, I need in this case at least 3 letters. And so if I put in there at least 3 letters, in this case I'll put, let's try Joe. And I got Joel 3. Okay. Now I could put JN that's kind of a standard abbreviation that some use for John. You can write out the full name, but that's helpful to know. The manual here gives some examples such as what we've already talked about, GN for Genesis. It talks about MT for Matthew, those kinds of things. The other thing to point out here too is that in regard to verse abbreviations, in this case, I can say Genesis 3:1. I'll zoom in here. Let's make this to where we can see that from the back row. I can say Gen 3:1 and still get there, or I can say Gen 3.1 and still get there as well. Either way. How many of you prefer to use the point over the colon? I can remember years ago editing it was Dan Block's commentary on on Ezekiel, and I was in charge of editing the scripture references and looking up every scripture reference in there. And at the time I didn't have accordance, and I remember when you're looking up thousands of scripture references, that was an extra step to have to hit that shift key, and so that being able to just use the decimal is very nice. And so again, that goes back to the flexibility of accordance. It will work the way that you want it to work. Now, the other thing that when you're doing a search for verses, you can do a search for a range. So maybe I've already got Genesis 3:1 here, so maybe I say Genesis 3:1 through 3. And so you'll see what it does. It gives me just those verses on the screen, those 3 verses. Now, let me ask you this question. How many of you maybe followed along, did the same thing, and you've got more than the 3 verses? Did that happen to anyone? Because sometimes the context slider might be set. So I guess everyone's on the same page here. That'll sometimes throw some people. But you can put in a range like that, but you can also put in, notice what I'm going to do here. I'm going to put in Genesis 3:1 through 3, and then I'm going to put in verse 5. I'm going to put in a semicolon, and I'm going to say Exodus 3, and I'm just kind of pulling these randomly, Exodus 3:2. I'll put in a comma and put in the number 6. That'll get us verse 6. I'll put in another semicolon, and you're using semicolons when you're changing either chapter or if you're changing the book itself. So in this case, let me change the chapter. Let's go to chapter 8, verse 2. Again, I'm just doing this randomly. And let's throw in something from the New Testament. I'll put in another semicolon, and I'll put Matthew 1:4. We'll get part of the genealogy there. Now notice I don't know what I hit wrong there, but let's try that again. And let me say this too: if you get an error, or if it doesn't give you what you're wanting, go back and look at what you typed. Sometimes maybe there needs to be a space there that you left out, or in this case, I don't know what happened. I thought I hit the 1, but it didn't go through. So now I'm going to hit return, and notice what it does. We started with that Genesis 1:3. That's still there, but here we have Genesis 3:5. We have Exodus 3:2. We have Exodus 3:6, Exodus 8:2, and Matthew 1:4. Now, while I'm here, while I'm thinking about it, if I highlight all these, which instead of using the mouse, you can do Control-A in Windows, you can do Command-A on the Mac, and it'll select all of the verses there. Tim talked a little bit about copying and pasting. You can copy this, and if you don't want the superscripts and things like that, you can certainly do that. But this is a really nice trick if you're working on a paper and you want just those references, and especially if you've done a search for a particular word. We're about to do some searches for words, and you've had a number of different listings, and you want to get all of these. You can come down here and just say copy references. I'm going to see if I can zoom in on here. Just copy references. Now when I copy references, let's see if Tim still has pages open. He does. So I'm going to just come down below what he had here and paste that in, and notice what it does. This is really intelligent. Well, one of you tell me what's significant about the way it pasted those references. Yeah, what it did not do is it doesn't say Exodus 3:2, Exodus 3:6, Exodus 8. It doesn't put that. It intelligently puts and it'll do this in a word search too. If you do a search for a number of different hits and it has a number of hits from different books, different chapters, it will do the same thing very intelligently, whatever you've grabbed there to paste. And so I do this all the time if I'm writing something and I want to refer to maybe a word or a concept that's in multiple passages in the Bible, and I maybe want to put that in a footnote. I'll copy just as references and paste that in there, and it's a very standard way of doing that. And by the way, the abbreviations can be controlled from the preferences as well. All right. Is everyone hanging in good so far? All right. Let's go back to accordance here. I think that must be two separate windows. Let me close that one. Okay, so we talked about these ranges. Notice also that you can put kind of the standard abbreviations. Let's use the example that's here, kind of toward the bottom third of page 13. They have Malachi 2, 4, and then F. What does that F mean? All right. So when I do that, it gives me the one verse following. Now what if I add a second F there? And I'll zoom into that too. So if I put a second F there, what will that do for me? Pardon? Yeah. So it gives us a much greater context here, right to the end of the chapter. So just as you would expect it to. And so sometimes that's helpful. Now, Tim talked about the context that's down there, and this is especially important. If you're just looking at that one verse, or at any point, what did I do? Oh, well, so this is a good example of it. I typed in Malachi 2:4, and notice that it's given me much more than Malachi 2:4. Well, the reason is this context has been slid all the way over to the right. So if you say, wait a minute, that's not what I want, all you have to do is you go in and you slide this over, and one thing you'll notice is that, see that number, how it's changing? So this is 0, 1 verse, 2 verse, all the way up to all verses. So if I slide that down to a 0 context, that'll show me just what I'm looking for, and that throws people sometimes. That'll throw folks, and there's also a preference setting to where you can set kind of a set context for your results as well. Okay, let's look at let's kind of look at some of what's on the next page, and we're going to jump into searching for words and phrases. All right. Now, I don't have to go back to all text like we had before. I can just pick up from where I left off. But if I want to search for words, and I've been searching for verses, what do I have to do? I have to switch back. And does anyone remember the keyboard shortcut from that? I can do a command semicolon or a control semicolon if you're using Windows, and it switches back to that. But if I forget, what's going to happen? If I forget, it's usually intelligent unless I use one of those common words. So usually it will figure that out. So in doing this search, let's use the example that they've got there. It's about the middle of page 14, and they're going to talk about a flex search. Now, the example that they give are using this idea of seek and find. Let me make sure that Tim's got his set. Yeah, he's got it set to flex search by default. Let me show you where that is. Since I looked, let me show you. If you look down on this, whoops, that's the wrong one. If you look down on this, the little magnifying glass, thank you. If you look down on that, it'll show at the bottom search options, flex search, or exact search. So we're going to start with this flex search. By the way, if you want to have one or the other set as your default, that's controlled in the settings too. You can go to the settings. I kind of leave mine on exact search because most of what I'm doing, I usually want an exact search. But sometimes that flex search is helpful as well. So I'm going to use a flex search for seek and find. Okay, so to kind of reinforce some of what Tim says in reading this search window, notice here it says that we have 130 flex hits. 130 flex hits, and then over here it says that we've got 60 verses. Okay, so 60 verses have been found, 130 flex hits, and notice here it's called a flex hit. Well, you tell me, just looking at the results that I got, why is that called a flex hit or flex search? Well, that's partly true too. They aren't next to each other. We'll talk about that in a second. And also, I heard it from someone. Various forms. Even though we're doing an English search, because we did that flex search, it's in various forms. And so we see here found. Even though I search for the word find, we see seeking, because it's taking into account the various ways we do that. Now, if I were to do an exact search, so let me switch over here to an exact search. Excuse me. If I was to do this, if I was to hit return right here, I get an error message. How come? Nowhere is the words seek and find together. Okay, nowhere is that together. So, and when you have that exact search, that means it's exactly what it's looking for. Now, sometimes we're used to Google and thinking that, okay, if I'm doing an exact search, I have to put quotation marks around that. Not so in accordance. You don't have to have the quotation marks to do that exact search. So if I wanted to do this search for seek and find, and David's going to talk about commands, but we'll do a little preview here. Two ways to do this. I can come here to the search menu, and I can find this command, and which I want to put right between these words. Now, the beauty of accordance is you don't have to memorize any key combinations to still access everything, and you certainly don't have to memorize any codes. Everything is there in the menu, and so that makes it really nice to say, okay, I know that I can go up to that search menu. I don't remember what it is, but I can go up to that search menu. I can still find it somewhere in there, and so you start looking at these and you find the context. But what you'll also notice is that right out beside and there's a keyboard shortcut if you want to memorize that, and that is a I always think of it as Command Shift A, but you can think of it, I guess it's shown there as Shift Command A. And for our Windows users, it should be a Control Shift A, okay? So I'm going to put and in there. I'm looking for every place in the Bible that has seek and find in the in the verse, okay? And so there we go. And again, to reinforce what these results mean, we have 33 exact hits. Tells us whether it's flex or exact, and it's in 16 verses. Okay. Now, when David comes up in a little bit, he'll show you some commands that you can put in. Like you can say, okay, I want seek within two words of find, or I want seek and not find, and those kinds of things. So he's going to come up in a little bit, and he's going to explain some of those things. But yes, absolutely.
So I did the seek, find, flex search.
Okay.
And then I wanted to do the seek and find search, but I still had the results from the flex search there, and it didn't change when I.
You mean it came back? It still gave you the same results, or do you mean that it wouldn't let you do the search?
The latter.
Okay. And okay, David's. You're getting the same results.
I had to go back down and change it back to exact. Because it backed up like the
Oh, if it okay, that may be the Look and make sure that it's on exact. Was that the issue for anyone? Let me also show you in preferences. If you're using Windows, preferences are on the edit menu. If you're using Mac, preferences are on the application menu, the accordance menu. And down here under search tabs, there's this section, find results using flex or exact, and that's a default. I mentioned that earlier. I tend to keep mine on exact on my computer, but that's just the way I tend to work. But whatever you do most often, set it back to that. But always, was that the issue for everyone, that it defaulted back to the flex search? So that's something always to pay attention to. Okay. All right. I'm going to look here on page. I'll tell you what. Let's move to page 19. Now I'm going to go back up here again, and I'm going to do a search. I'll just follow the example that's here in your book, and notice that again we're getting a little bit into David's area with commands, but we're going to enter one little command symbol, an asterisk, or it's sometimes called a wildcard. What do those do generally in searches? What are you already familiar with in that regard? Pick up anything. In a way, it's kind of like that flex search in a sense. So if we follow that example that's there in your training manual, I've just typed LOV asterisk or LOV wildcard, and so I get that, and it's given me 774 hits. Now I'm using Tim's default ESV here on his system, so your number may vary, but I'm getting 774 exact hits. And the verses are one of 678. Let me ask you this question. How come we're just searching for one word, how come we have more hits than we have verses? Some verses will have the word more than once. Okay, so that's always to keep in mind. If you say, wow, that number is really not what I expect it to be, often it's because of a situation that's like that. Now, I performed that search, and notice that we have cases of not just love, but loved, loves. I was going to see if we have any loving. There's probably in here somewhere, but I tell you what we can do. We can go here to this symbol right here, this analysis symbol. You see that it's got a little bar graph on it, okay? So we're going to go to that, and there's a number of things it'll do. The first one that we're going to look at here following the kind of the outline of this seminar manual is I'm going to go down first just to a hits graph. Now, your chart may have a white background or it may have a black background. That's another one of those settings things. But when you look at this, the hits. In fact, I'm going to use another one of those things that Tim showed you. I'm going to magnify the zone. That's on the right for the Mac. It's on the left for Windows. I hope I'm saying that correctly. All week long, I've been closing windows that I want to expand because I've been going back and forth, and that's not fun. But I'm going to expand that window out and allow you to see that a little bit better. Now, look at the chart for a minute. What can you tell me? Just someone give me some analysis based on this. This is, now granted it's English. We're not really working with original languages here, but still the general idea of that word love or the various forms of it from Genesis to Revelation. Someone give me some analysis based on this chart.
There's no love in 2 Kings.
Okay, good. Yeah. There's no love in 2 Kings. Yeah, lots of... And, growing up in some churches where Revelation kind of scared me, I wouldn't have thought that, but it's there, right? What else? I heard a couple other ones.
Psalms and Proverbs, wisdom writings.
Yeah. We have this peak there in the wisdom writers, and then in the New Testament we have a peak in some of the Johannine writings as well. Even over here in the letters of John as well. And the wider your screen or the higher resolution, the more detail that'll give you down at the bottom as far as showing you those various books. So your screen may look a little bit different than this. Okay, so that's one thing that we can do. So I'll bring that back down. I can, yes.
Can you just take the section after you're doing the search and just amplify one section of the graph?
Well, I'll tell you what you can do. That's a very good question about amplifying one section. What I'd like to be able to do, David, since you've got the ear for the company here, I'd like to be able to take 2 fingers on my trackpad and just do this. We can't do that yet. But let me show you what we can do. This is something that Tim showed you about. You remember this little plus button here? Someone tell me what that plus button does. Refines the search. So let's go in here and let's refine the search. We're going to do a range. And let's see if we've got one of those sections where, I was going to see if he had one, because you can set these up for whatever you want. Let's look at John's Gospel here. Okay, so I'm going to do the same search and for this word love, but we're just looking in John's Gospel. Now, 57 hits, 39 verses in the ESV. Notice that our chart automatically updated, and I'll go ahead and magnify that out, and that gives us a chapter by chapter analysis of that. Anyone who's familiar with John, can you draw some analysis from that? Right there, where Jesus, it's kind of a lengthy, it spans a number of chapters, but it's right there in that section where he's talking about, the world will know you by your love for one another, and he's talking about all these things. Well, it's concentrated right there. And, that's also pretty powerful, not just for your own work, but because you can do this with original languages too. But it's powerful if you're in a teaching setting, if you're in a classroom or if you're in a church, to show where these, if you want to talk in terms of themes, where a lot of these themes are really emphasized in a particular book or in a particular portion of the Bible. So if I right click, control click on the Mac, or double click on the Mac, or right click in Windows, if I do that, I bring up this contextual menu and I can say copy picture, and then I'm going to jump over here to pages and I'm going to paste that in. I'm going to paste that in. Oh, I know it. The new Pages. Does anyone use Pages? they change stuff in the new pages. And so that's not working. Let's see, he's got Word on here. It'll do it in Word. How many of you are upset about the changes in the iWork apps? Anyone in here upset? Okay, there's some hands, thank you. Let's try maybe it killed it. So let's try it one more time. Copy picture. Well, that's pages. Wow. You know, it used to work. Does it work on yours? If it works on yours, we'll just blame Tim. I don't know. It's his computer, so yeah. I'm glad it. I have to try one more time here. Try what? Okay, yeah, that's a good idea. I was doing it with the commands, but let me try that. Yes. Ah, okay. See, look at that. I told you it was Tim's fault. Okay, good. I was really worried about my copy and paste skills. That's not even 101. That's 099, right? Okay. That's a good question. Really good questions this morning. Okay, so what else can we do with this kind of information? Going to move that back out where you can see it there. And so, again, we've had these. We're just here in John, but I actually want to go back to. I want to go back to where it was the search for everything. So I'm going to kill my range here, and let's do that search again. So now we're back to our 774 hits, and so I can come back to this analysis icon again, and I'm going to just come down here to underneath word count totals. I'm going to come down to the analysis option. So when I come down here to the analysis option, because we were working with a tagged or a key numbered English text, because of that fact, it will actually break this down to show how a particular translation is using a particular word based on the original languages. So when you look here, this will be a review too for. So we'll see if you're listening to Tim here. What do these numbers mean again? Those are our Strong's numbers. And if it has a G in front of it, what does it mean? Greek. And if it has an H in front of it, what does it mean? Hebrew. Right. So that's showing us and kind of a wide variety here. And so if we really want to get a feel, because it tells us how many. If you look here to the side, it tells us how many words are translated in a particular way. Notice that agape has 108 in the New Testaments, but down here is Philadelphia, brotherly love. It's 3, and we have phileo is 13 down here. Okay, but let's look at this from another perspective. So if I come down here and I'm going to do a pie chart, okay. Right now, okay, let's look at this chart in two different ways. Someone interpret this chart for me. Tell me what we're looking at. So you're the instructor, you're supposed to tell me.
At least in Greek, most of the translations above are English.
Yeah, but the interesting thing here is, right here, we're not yet really dealing with the Greek yet, okay? Because here, this goes back to that wildcard search that I did. But if I want to know how the Greek is applied, I'm going to switch this. Notice that there's a little drop-down menu here, and it says word. I can switch that to key number. That's those Strong's numbers. And so when I switch that to key number, now someone...
Oh, that's what mine was in.
Okay, that's what yours was in. So it wasn't you, it was me. Okay? So someone tell me what we're lking at now. You can tell us because you were correct the first time looking at your results.
It has a Hebrew translations of love in the New Testament are from the word agape.
Yeah, it really shows us. And now, if we wanted to just look at the Greek, how could we have done this search differently? Anyone can set that range for New Testament. And when David comes up here and talks about commands, he'll even show you how you can just use range up there in the search window. But you can have one of those presets if you're really doing a lot of searches in a particular area. So I can reset the search just for New Testament if I just wanted to see how those. In fact, it won't take but a second. So let's do that real quick. I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to hit that little plus button, and I'm going to make my range New Testament. Now, you'll have to help me here. Does yours have preset already New Testament on yours? Those of you who are following along? Okay, good. I assumed it did, but I wanted because again, these are customizable. If you saw my computer over there, I've got all kinds of very specific things that I've done from different studies or research or things that I've done in the past, and I just leave them once I set them up. So now we're going to do a search just here for love in the New Testament, and when I do that, that gives us more exact results as far as the Greek goes. Okay, so we could say agapao is 48.4%, agape is 40.2%. So that's the difference between our verb and our noun. And then phileo is over here at 7.8%. And then you have these little smaller ones. And so if you wanted to know the smaller numbers, now if you have a big screen, you could probably stretch that out and it would show up for you. But someone tell me, what could I do if I wanted to know precisely each one of those? What could I do? Now it may not show up on my pie chart here in the screen, but what could I do if I wanted to know these other words that are being used? I showed you a while ago. When I just did this approach right here, this shows me a list of everything. Okay, when I just did that basic search, that very first one that I did. When I came here and I just did underneath word count totals analysis, that'll list every word for me in case I need to know something like that.
I got numbers instead of percentages.
You got
That's a setting.
okay, yeah. So that's in your, what setting would that be in, David?
Go in the gear menu here.
Oh, the settings here. I thought you okay.
I got it, thanks. It'll be in the set display.
Yeah.
Choose to customize.
You can customize the display and then you can change that. Okay. I was thinking in terms of the overall preferences that was set because I couldn't remember where that would be. But yeah, you can do it you can change that for the item that's right here, the chart that's in front of you. Okay. The other one that your manual talks about here as well is this. You can do this. You can show as well a bar chart. And again, according to what kind of context you're using, that may or may not be more helpful. Now, someone tell me again, if I want to see the actual original language, what do I do here? Because right now it's just set on these English words. What do I need to do?
Go to the toggle there.
Yeah, so I just need to toggle here. Whoops, I had my controls still held down. I changed that to key number, and then it shows me the original languages. If I can stop that. It shows me the original languages in that bar chart with the numbers. Okay. Is that making anyone seasick when I zoom in and out like that? It's a setting in your system preferences over not accordance preferences, but system preferences under accessibility under zoom. There's a little checkbox for control scroll. So every time I zoom in on something like that for you, I'm holding down the control button and I'm hitting the scroll, and it zooms in on what you're doing. And so I've done it at church before though, and I've had some people say, "Stop doing that. You're making me sick." Okay. All right. Talk so long, my iPad with the manual here turned itself off. All right, so any questions on that? Yes, Graham.
I've got a question for you, Greg.
Okay.
You see one of of the results there that has a single hit is kata, which quite obviously is not.
Yeah.
Is there a way to search simply for that one instance from your results?
To search just for the yes, and that gets us into our next part of our discussion. And so the next part of our discussion is searching by these key numbers. Okay, so I'm running behind on time. So, but we're almost done. But we're going to answer your question there, Graham. That was a good question.
Rick,
Yes.
why don't you, the quick and dirty way to do that, and then you can do whatever you were going to do.
Okay.
Go to the analysis. And find it in the analysis.
Just are you talking about just doing
Just straight analysis, yeah. Now find where you have kata.
right here? Okay.
All right, so select the key number under that,
Okay.
and then do search this resource from the amplified menu, or you can right click it.
Oh, I see what you're saying. But yeah, we can. I right clicked. He talked about doing it from the amplify menu. Like most things, there's more than one way to do it, and I just kind of naturally did what I would normally do. So that you're no longer walking in love. That is unusual.
It's according to love, so it would be kata, cafe, or whatever.
Okay, so if
So in that case, the tag is, the love has been tagged with 2 words, 2 key numbers.
okay,
Probably, the kata probably should be thrown in.
yeah. So we need to make a note and fix that.
Right.
Okay.
Hey, we'll have Graham do it.
Yeah, Graham, fix that. You brought it up. It's not as clear, so yeah. Graham is one of our programmers. So yeah. All right. So what page did I tell you to go to? I said 23, I believe. Yeah. Look on page 23. And this is for searching with these key numbers. Now, let me close this out. And I'm going to put our instant details back on. And again, this is just this icon that's up here that has the little lightning bolt, the little Captain Marvel lightning bolt. If you'll just click that, your instant detail shows up. And Tim explained it, but one of you tell me what's showing up there in that instant details window when I put the mouse over these words.
We dragged off so we can't see it.
Oh, I'm sorry. What's showing? What is this information in the instant details windows? What is that for? This has given us the original language information that's underlying that English word, and this is in any of the key numbered text. And by the way, on these key numbers, there's actually a variety of systems within accordance. Everything from your original Strongs, like if you're doing a search in a tagged King James, but it's been cleaned up because if you may have heard that there's mistakes in Strong's. See, we fixed these, so it's. I say we. I had nothing to do with it, but it's fixed in accordance. And so, but they also use for like the NIV, I'm getting a time signal here. Okay, what was it? It's the Kohler Baumgartner or the GK numbers, the Goodrich Cullen yeah, I can't say it, but anyway, these very specific numbers that have even the New American Standard tag text has the ones that the Lockman Foundation had kind of modified from Strong. So you get specific to some of these, but anything that has a key number, you can do these searches on. And since I'm close to being out of time, let's do this real quick. So an example that's up here about midway through on page 23 is this word spirit. Okay, so now I'm going to go back here and I'm just going to do a search for spirit. And when I hit that, notice that some of these results are capitalized and some are not capitalized. How come? Right, Holy Spirit versus Matthew 5:3, the poor in spirit. Okay, So when I grade my students' papers, often I have to correct some of those capitalization issues like that. But you know, when you do that, obviously these aren't going to be the same word all the time. And so if I look here, let me go back to the. Oh, I'm still in the New Testament. Let's go back to all text, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that again, so it'll match what you've got there in your manual. So if I put my mouse over the word spirit in Genesis 1:2, I get that Hebrew word ruach. And so if I say, okay, this word ruach may not be the same as some of these other words, and I don't know if we can find one real quick. But trust me, there's some other results here that aren't ruach. And so if I want to say, okay, I just want to know where ruach is found, I can do what's called a key numbered search. I can right click on spirit and or control click on the Mac, or sometimes you can do on some Macs 2-finger click. But you bring up that contextual menu, and I can search for not just a word, but I can search for a key number. So when I search for the key number, that's going to give me the results. Notice up here that the key number gets put into the search. It says key H7307. That is the number for ruach. And so now when I do that search, notice that it gives me some other words. Notice that here I've got cool. Okay, so walking in the garden in the ruach of the day is based, but it wasn't necessarily talking about the Spirit of God, but that word is used in more than one way. So if I want to do a search just for spirit or just for cool, I can put in here the @ symbol, and I'm going to do one here for cool. And when I hit my return key, I only get that result, because what I've done here is I've specified, well, I want this key number, but I only want to see how this particular word shows up. By the same token, I can do spirit, and I can get those results as well. All right? Any questions real quick, because I'm getting this, they're about to bring out the hook. Any questions, thoughts, comments, rebuttals? Okay. I think it's break time, right?
It is great time.
Okay.